This movie I was asked to put together to try and help explain a little bit about what's going on. And so let's get started. First of all, I'm not a doctor. This is my best effort to explain something that is affecting everyone. Some of the terms are medical. There are going to be changes a month from now. This may or may not be as accurate, but it's the best I can do at the time we're writing this. Some important terms. First, pandemic is a disease that affects a large number of people over multiple continents. So one of the things that people were waiting for was the large region to be affected and a large number of people. A virus is a type of microorganism, meaning it's something too small to see with the naked eye, and it's basically genetic material inside a protein shell. So if you think of an M&M as being chocolate inside a candy shell, you've got an idea of what a virus is. They're much, much smaller than a normal cell because they don't have to carry out the normal life cycles of a cell. A coronavirus is a virus that has the shape of a crown. Think of it as a donut that they've squished the middle but haven't actually knocked the middle of it out. Asymptomatic simply means the person doesn't show symptoms, and WHO refers to the World Health Organization. It's a portion of the United Nations responsible for gathering, relaying information and advice to try and prevent or slow the spread of disease. So that's an overview of some of the terms I'm going to be using as we go through. Moving on. Oh, by the way, you don't need to copy this. I'm assuming you realize that, but just to make sure. First, viruses. Viruses are parasites. They just need a host cell, and in this situation, us, to reproduce. The way they do this is they enter the host cell, they take over the cell, and the cell is then forced to make new viruses. There's what's called an incubation period. That's the time from when a person is exposed to the virus in the first place until they can spread the disease. During that time, the person is often asymptomatic, no symptoms showing, which is why the disease is usually able to spread from person to person quickly, because a person may not even realize they are with the disease and therefore don't know they're spreading it. Disease means the person is symptomatic, is felt because either the cells can't do their job, and if the cells aren't doing their job, your body has a problem, or our body has recognized that there's a problem, that there's some kind of attack like a parasite, and it's using its defenses to try and fight off the virus, and the response sometimes is uncomfortable. One of the most common is a fever. A fever is our body's natural response to certain types of infection, because if you get a fever, your body's able to work a little more effectively, and hopefully the virus or whatever has gotten into you is a little less effective. And so fever is one of our tools, but we don't like having a fever. If a person is able to successfully defeat the virus, so if your immune response is good enough that it can do that, you live, and the body then replaces all the cells that are damaged or destroyed by the virus. So that's basically what the virus is trying to do. Moving on. Transmission of the virus. How does this thing get from person to person? To prevent transmission, which is our goal, viruses must not be allowed to move from person to person either directly or indirectly by stopping on some other surface. They can be spread in droplets of water or bodily fluids, and sometimes they can be airborne. Many viruses can stay active, meaning alive, on surfaces, and in some cases for days. They've done some studies, and this new virus seems to be able to stay alive on materials like metals or plastic for possibly a couple of days, but on things like paper, cardboard, the time is usually under a day, so it depends widely on the type of surface. The most common way for a virus to enter your body is through what's called the T, the capital T, referring to your eyes, nose, and mouth. So capital T like that. What's the issue? We often reach out and touch things, and then we touch our face. And they've done studies where they will put a camera beside a person and just watch them as they're doing their normal day. And without even thinking about it, we rub our eyes, we scratch, hopefully we don't do worse things, and we touch our faces a lot. And so if we touch something that has the virus on it and then touch our face, congratulations, you've now made it easy for the virus to get in because your eyes, because they're covered with water, great place for the virus to live. Nose and mouth, wet environments, great place for those viruses to stick. Anything like wearing a mask, social distancing, washing your hands with soap and water, or using hand sanitizer if you can't wash with soap and water, are intended to decrease the transmission by either killing the virus or stopping the virus from getting from one person to another. It is very unlikely to get the virus if you are outside by yourself. So there's a lot of discussion about, can I go to a park, and why do they rope off the benches and things like that. The problem is not sitting on a bench. There is some risk of indirect transmission because the virus could be on a bench and could be transmitted from there to there. Playground equipment, same thing. The real issue is people, because as soon as you have a few people in a park, a few more people join them, somebody brings a soccer ball, all of a sudden you've got a game, or maybe you're throwing a ball around, and now if something's on the ball, you're passing it from person to person. So the laws that are being created by municipalities about social distancing, the intention is to have people stay separate from each other if they're not in the same family group that is living together. That's the intention. The challenge is writing laws that make that effective. And so there's going to be some discrepancies. If you want to go out for a walk, it shouldn't be a problem to go out for a walk. But when you get close to people, you got to stay at least 6 feet away, or 2 meters. Okay, that's the intention. We're going to move on to the next slide now. Hopefully. Maybe. Give a response. There we go. So what about school? These are the things we know. The schools, as of today, are scheduled to reopen on June the 1st, which is Monday. You can still learn in all your courses, don't give up. It's obviously canceled classes like we're used to, all the extracurriculars. Grade 12s don't like the fact that prom was canceled. The marks that you've already gotten on your midterm report are the lowest marks you can earn in your courses from high school at this time. So right now at midterm, you got a 23%. Promise your mark can't drop below a 23%. It can go up, but it can't drop below 23%. So everything you do from now on has the potential to raise your average. So if you're continuing to do the work that I assign or any other teacher assigns and you hand it in and you're doing a better job than what you were before, your mark can go up, but your mark can't go down because there are some people who, through no fault of their own, don't have internet access, don't have technology, may not have the opportunities that some of you have to continue working because some of you have no responsibilities other than doing your schoolwork, looking after yourself, and other people have other responsibilities, including working outside the home. Some people are looking after siblings. There are other challenges. So that's where your mark is. If you're involved in dual credit, that's a different story. Anyone in dual credit, those marks can rise and fall. So those marks you have to keep up with for sure. Next, if you're graduating as well, if you're supposed to be graduating this year and you happen to not have passed the literacy test, or you don't have your 40 hours of community service for this year only, those are waived. So if you're missing either of those, you get to graduate. Grade 10s, you haven't had a chance to write your grade 10 literacy test yet, so don't think that this got you free of that test. Next year, we will learn more about that. What we don't know yet. All right, don't know if they're going to change the date for going back into school. They've changed it once, it could happen again. Graduation ceremony for the grade 12s, we'll find out about that later. And locker clean out and textbook return. Again, if we're back in the school sometime in June, easy to figure out. If we're not back in the school before the end of June, something about that will have to be figured out. And naturally, everything else. So yes, I know there's a lot that is unknown, but there are some things that are known, and we have to be a little flexible right now because most of us have never done this before. I've never taught like this before. You've never learned like this before. Your parents probably haven't had to teach you like this before. Let's cut each other a little bit of slack and roll with it. All right, moving on. Some medical issues to think about. We're trying to understand the language they're using in the news. So if too many people are getting sick at one time, more people go into hospital than the hospitals actually have beds for, and the bed shortage and shortage of other resources means more people will die. Because if a person comes in and they really need a hospital bed because they're really sick, but every bed is taken, and everyone else in the hospital is just as sick as that person is, they've got no room, they try and find a place, but there's just too many people for the system to handle. That's why we've got this term called flattening the curve. It refers to making the number of new infections stop increasing, stabilize or flatten out, and then what we want is it to ideally start decreasing. So flattening the curve means the number of infections that we've identified is steady, and then will slowly start to decrease. That's what we're trying to accomplish. The closing of schools, businesses, banning gatherings, all of those are intended to limit your exposure so that we have less people getting sick, and those are ways to flatten that curve. Once the curve is flattened, the government, with advice from the World Health Organization and our own medical officers of health, will then decide which restrictions to remove. Now, people want to get out, they want to restart businesses, they want to restart sporting events, they want to get all those things going. And there is no one right or wrong way of doing this. What we need to understand is that when we allow things to reopen, more people are going to start getting sick because we haven't completely stopped the disease. If there's anybody out there with the disease, it can be spread. If we do the opening correctly, the number of new cases will be small enough that the medical system can handle it. That's the goal, to have as few people getting sick at a time so that whatever resources are needed in the hospitals and in the community are available so that we minimize the number of people who die from this. However, there are people who need money from their jobs to pay for food, housing, clothes, and everything else. And that's part of the reason why there's a lot of pressure to open things up as quick as possible, because it's not just about keeping alive, it's keeping food so that you don't get starvation, you don't get thrown out of your apartment or house and stuff like that. So there's a lot of people with a lot of real pressures. Moving on to the last slide. There's a lot of talk about a vaccine, so let's talk about that. We've eradicated smallpox. We've slowed a lot of other diseases. Vaccines are generally considered very safe and effective, certainly considering the diseases they are preventing. There's been a lot of emphasis lately on getting a vaccine developed. The best estimates that we've been seeing is 12 to 18 months, a year to a year and a half, if things go well. In order for that vaccine to actually be effective and deal with cutting down disease, we got two things that have to be addressed. First, the virus has to mutate, which means change that protein shell very slowly. So if we go back to that M&M thing with the chocolate in the nice candy shell, a mutation would be, used to be a red shell and now it's an orange shell. The colors just are a preference for maybe us for a flavor, but the change in that shell is what allows us to stop that vaccine. We normally vaccinate by giving a weakened version. We learn how to fight it. Well, if the virus protein changes, all that learning is now lost because it's a new shape, and therefore we don't have protection from it. So for the vaccine to be effective, whatever rate of mutation has to be slow enough that we can vaccinate people to stop the disease. And on top of that, our body has to keep the antibodies, which are chemical memories of how to fight the disease. Our bodies remember different viruses differently. Some we remember for a short period of time, some we remember for our lifetime. If you've done the assignment with regards to the vaccinations, what you should know is that certain diseases we vaccinate 1 or 2 times and then we don't have to vaccinate again ever. Other diseases need to be vaccinated more frequently because our body forgets. It'll depend on how our body deals with this particular virus. So those are the two issues about whether or not a vaccine is going to be available and effective. Neither of these is known yet because it's a new virus, and so we'll have to keep going. What if there is no effective vaccine? Okay, and that's a possibility. We will need to change our behaviors for a very long period of time as the disease slowly moves through the population. So all those social distancing things will need to continue. There are some people who have said that from now on they will never shake hands with people. They're not trying to be rude. They're trying to say, I'm going to minimize how this disease can spread. It's no different than saying, hey, instead of coughing into my hand, I'm going to cough into my elbow. It's a change in behavior for a purpose. So as we go through the next few months, we're going to learn a lot more about this disease. Some of these questions about can we find an effective vaccine will become much clearer. What the time frame is for that will become much clearer. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. If it turns out that we are still out of the school in June, someone remind me, and I will update this video with whatever new information we need so that I can hopefully help you understand this better for the summer. And because EDSB doesn't allow me to update things through the summer, if we're still out in the summer and there's something significant, I could probably post something in the YouTube channel. So if you happen to have subscribed, you can get into that. No, that's not a blatant pitch to try and get more people watching my movies. I know I'll never get enough money out of it to be worth anything. Hopefully this helped. Thanks for watching.